The 2009 movie Cars is a beloved movie for Gen Z. For the most part, people look back on it for its amazing soundtrack, famous actors such as the late Paul Newman and Owen Wilson, and an overall nice animation. That's not what I'm going to be talking about though. Instead, I'm going down a more interesting route. This video will be sectioned into 3 parts. The basics of the Cars universe, the red flags, for lack of a better term, and the theories. With that being said, let's jump right into it. To start off, the first Cars movie came out in 2009 and was generally a classics kids movie. It was about a rookie race car who unfortunately got lost on Route 66, causing him to wind up in a small town called Radiator Springs. He goes through a lot of trial and error during his time there and grows as a person and as a racer. Cars 2 came out in 2011 and was drastically different from the first one. Lightning McQueen isn't the focus of this movie, instead, it's his best friend Mater. It was like a breath of fresh air. It was like if The Kingsman or James Bond met Cars, with the main plot being about big oil and shady businessmen. Not to mention, it has the highest on-screen kill count in any Pixar movie within just the first 10 to 20 minutes. We move on to Cars 3 with Lightning McQueen having a midlife crisis. He realizes that he's getting old and can't keep up with the rest of these new age race cars. And through a lot of struggle, he realizes he can't go on racing forever. He goes on to teach his trainer how to race, saying to the car who bought his main sponsor that if she wins, that he'll be able to continue racing and stop racing on his own terms rather than his sponsor's terms. It has almost the same vibes as the first Cars movie with hints of the second Cars movie. I'll get into that later. And finally, Planes movies, we see more into the plane racing side of the Cars cinematic universe. We have pretty much the same plot for Planes as Cars, but with the exception of it's more of an underdog story rather than a rookie story. Planes Fire and Rescue, however, is teaching kids how firefighters and search and rescue deal with forest fires and just how dangerous they can be. Now you may be wondering, hey, why did you choose this for a video essay? Well, I'm going to be completely honest. It all started roughly last year with a question that someone in my friend group asked, which was the question, if there's a TSA, does that mean that there was a Cars 9/11? Now, I don't take 9/11 jokes lightly, as it's still a fairly recent tragedy and affects a lot of people, but it is a good question. Which leads us to the red flags of the Cars cinematic universe. We will mainly be talking about Cars 2, since that's the movie with the most red flags. As I mentioned, the whole reason why I chose this to be my topic was because of the TSA question my friends asked last year. In the film, they have TSA, which doesn't make a lot of sense since the whole reason why we have TSA is because of 9/11. And if there was the equivalent of 9/11 in the Cars universe, then that brings up the question if a plane did 9/11. Cars 2 and the Planes movies shows us that the planes are also sentient. So it's just a matter of if the planes are the ones who did 9/11 or were taken over in some way to cause it. Going back to the movie, it has the highest kill count in any Pixar film within just the first 10 to 20 minutes. There are active torture scenes, mutilation, and deaths on screen, as well as the off-screen death of Doc Hudson due to the fact that Paul Newman had passed away. There are also assassination attempts on the racers and the Queen of England. Funnily enough, the assassination attempts brings me to my next point. and that is that there is a Pope and a Pope-mobile in Cars 2. The whole reason why there is the Pope-mobile in the first place is because there was an assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II in 1981. So this means that somebody tried to assassinate car Pope John Paul II. Not only this, but the implications that there is a car pope implies that there is religion, or at the very least, Catholics and Christians in the Cars universe. Which implies the existence, or the belief of existence, of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, which also begs the question of what type of car was Jesus? I mean, was he a wagon, maybe a horse-drawn carriage? Or are depictions of Jesus more modern, like how Jesus in our universe was horrifically whitewashed over the ages? That was a lot of questions that I just threw at you, of which I will be answering none of them. I had also mentioned before the Queen of England was also in the movie, but I didn't mention that Prince William also makes an appearance by talking to the late Queen towards the end of it. They aren't even the first famous people to have a character in the franchise. Hell, even Cars 2. The main spy, Finn McMissile, is literally based off of James Bond, and that is shown with the type of car that he is based off of, which is the Aston Martin DB7 that came out in 1964. His voice actor, Michael Caine, played Arthur in The Kingsman: The Secret Service, as well as Nigel Powers in Austin Powers in Goldmember. So there's a lot more with the whole British spy stereotype. There's also the stereotypical German villain car named Professor Z, who's voiced by Thomas Kretschmann, who will be in the new Indiana Jones movie, as well as having been in Resident Evil Apocalypse. It's not a good movie. Don't watch it. It's not great. Not only this, but there is a car that bears the significant resemblance to that of Arnold Schwarzenegger, even having him in a seat of power since he was the governor of California from 2003 until 2011, which falls in between when the movie was being produced. And it being a Cars film, there are also some race car drivers that made a cameo with their own cars. Some notable ones being Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, and Jeff Gordon. There's also some planes in the first Planes movie named Echo and Bravo, who are Navy planes who resembles the characters from Top Gun, Goose and Iceman. They even got their original actors Anthony Edwards and Val Kilmer to voice these two planes. Now, speaking of the Planes movie, specifically when Echo and Bravo appear, there is a flashback to World War II where it's shown that Skipper's one mission was the only mission that he had been in and lied about the rest. The plot here isn't what is important, it's the fact that World War II exists in the Cars cinematic universe, which implies quite a lot in this universe. Also, it implies that there was a World War I and the assassination of a car version of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. Yet more historical events that seem to have happened in the Car cinematic universe that reflect our own. Steering away from the more historical parallels and more towards the social side of things, there's also apparently slurs in the Cars cinematic universe, specifically geared towards older and more rusty cars. It's the whole plot of the second movie, that and Big Oil, which in itself is quite revolutionary for a kids' film to be talking about green energy and the message that people sometimes will have malicious motives for the things that they do to help others, or, in the case of the villain in Cars 2, help with global warming. Which this brings us back to car racism, car sexism, and car ageist references. And I haven't even touched on the car sexism part, but that's mainly because it's in the third movie. Some other red flags that don't really fit with what I had said before are the fact that there's also slightly sexual references. This is mainly to entertain the parents who are watching it, but it's still notable to mention. An example of this is Mia and Tia in Cars flashing Lightning McQueen as their 1992 Mazda Miatas and their headlights flip up. There's also a moment where you see that Sally has the equivalent of a tramp stamp and is briefly made fun of by Lightning McQueen for having it. And finally, in Cars 2, there is a slight mention of if Lightning McQueen will be on the cover of the next Car Girl, which I assume is in reference to Call Girls or Playboy magazines. The first two Cars movies have a bit of sexual undertones when referring to the female characters in their films, while in Cars 3 it actually talks about sexism. Specifically the scene where Sterling, who is voiced by Nathan Fillion, he's so slight to me, says that Cruz was a race car trainer, and Lightning says, well, no, that's because no one gave her the chance to actually race before. There's a line in Cars 3 where Lightning and Cruz meet some of the other old-timers from Doc Hudson's time to train, and Luis Barnstormer Nash had said in this particular scene, of course the fellas in charge didn't like a lady racer showing them up, so they wouldn't let me have a number. And then further down the line says, if we had waited for an invitation, we might have never raced. Needless to say, this was included to empower both Lightning and Cruz. Lightning for the fact that he was getting old and needed to deal with that fact, and Cruz for the fact that everyone who held some sort of power over her told her that she couldn't race, and this was to show that, hey, you can, just do it. Another red flag that didn't really fit in with any of the previous that I had mentioned is actually goes in two parts. The first one being that there are car children, and the second one is that the tractors are animals and bugs are Volkswagen Beetles. To touch upon the first one, we don't know why they are car children, nor how cars reproduce and die, because it is seen in clips of Doc Hudson, Lightning McQueen, and King that a car crash doesn't really kill cars, and running out of gas, as seen in Cars 2 with Miles' Axelrod, also doesn't kill you. So we don't know how cars are brought into and out of their world, but we do know that there are car children, as being said by Cruz in Cars 3, and this clip that got popular on TikTok. To the second part of this red flag, we see that tractors and motorized farming vehicles are considered to be the equivalent of cattle or bulls. This is shown throughout the franchise, as tractor tipping is one of Mater's favorite activities. It is also seen in Planes Fire and Rescue that deer, or deer-like creatures, are portrayed by vehicles that resemble John Deere branded vehicles, which is very silly to me. It is also shown that bugs are Volkswagen Beetles, which is another hilarious way of showing life within the Cars cinematic universe that isn't just sentient talking beings. The reason why this is considered a red flag to me, at least, is because they are all vehicles that run off of gas. So is this a sort of situation like how Goofy is dog, but Pluto is also a dog? Or was it just to show that there are other vehicles that are considered animals in the Cars cinematic universe? That being said, when you think about it, the Cars cinematic universe is absolutely insane, which is really weird when you think about the fact that this is a kids franchise about anthropomorphic cars and car racing. It makes me wonder if this was all intentional or just a one-off from Disney and Pixar that they did without a second thought like they had done in other films in the past. In the end, there are some theories that I've collected over the period of the last year. The first one being that it's a child playing God and, having learned all the things that they have about human history, implemented it into their world so it would be more real to them. As well as the fact of the knowledge of knowing that cars need gas to function, but not knowing that it comes from another childhood hyperfixation of dinosaurs. The second one is that we are stuck in a massive and never-ending time loop. You see, it starts with the Big Bang, and then history as we know it plays out until we get to a point where the humans are the cause of their own demise due to global warming and or other factors. Somehow the cars become sentient and play out human history as we wrote it, causing it to be an almost exact parallel of how we know human history. Then the sun dies out, because that's going to happen eventually, causing the Earth to freeze and cease all life that was existing up to that point. And then the cycle continues with the start of the Big Bang. Now, that last one is a bit far-fetched when you don't know where the cars came from or how they became sentient in the first place. So, I also have some theories on that. The first one being that the cars are aliens, and for some reason or another, they need the deserted cars that the humans had left behind, and using it as an exoskeleton, they exist. Which this explains why there are car children in the first place, because they reproduce one way or another. The second one being that the cars are AI that were created by humans, and then the AI turned on the humans, much like how in Season 2, Episode 8 and 9 of the Orville. Now, this theory doesn't explain why there are car children, but it does explain some things, like how the car society is so closely related to our own. Thank you for watching my video on the Cars cinematic universe, and if you have any other red flags or theories about this, put it in the comments below, because I would love to read them. I hope this video made you question things about the franchise that you never knew that you needed to question. And if you're watching this from my English final presentation, hi! If you have any interest in seeing a project like this again, hit the like button and comment what you think I should research next. Thank you, and till next time.